Admiral Zhao's ship was preparing to dock at a Fire Nation colony. From the considerable lack of things on fire, he knew he arrived too late. The Avatar wasn't here anymore. Regardless, Zhao would talk with local authorities and gather clues. With little luck, the airbender was still in the vicinity, and the Admiral intended to send out search parties first thing tomorrow morning. Zhao's gaze landed on one of the fire vessels already docked. Even in the dim light of the moon, it was impossible not to recognize. Well, well, look what we have here. Must be my lucky day. Zhao's lips quirked in a rare, genuine smile. Avatar or no avatar, this would be a satisfying day for the newly appointed admiral. He had been waiting for his chance for revenge, and it looked like fate had decided to provide him with one. The sun had barely risen when Zuko finally reached the colony. He wrapped the blue spirit mask in the scarf he'd been wearing and hid them both under the roots of a big willow tree next to the river. As much as the prince didn't like losing another mask, it wasn't wise to walk around with incriminating evidence in his pocket. Not after the show that he and the Avatar had put on last night. His dirty clothes, complimentary to his late-night swim and the jog through the woods, were suspicious enough on their own. Tiredly, Zuko made his way toward the harbor, dreaming of nothing but a hot bath and a warm bed. The town was still buzzing with soldiers, but there was hardly a surprise. A sighting of the Avatar always caused a fuss. Zuko had lost count of all the times he had been one of those pursuing who came to the scene of a crime an hour too late, missing all the action. I see we meet again, Prince Zuko, a cold voice sang from behind him. Zuko turned to see the calculative stare of Admiral Zhao. The prince suppressed an urge to roll his eyes. He'd been up all night, and he felt tired and grumpy. He was so not in the mood for dealing with Zhao right now. Admiral Zhao, Zuko acknowledged and nodded his head, attempting to appear disinterested and royal, a hard thing to achieve in his battered state. Zhao smiled a predatory smile. He looked Zuko from head to toe, taking in the prince's unusually shabby appearance, stopping only for a moment to survey his new haircut. Finally, the older man concluded, Must have been a busy night. Did you happen to see where the Avatar went? I didn't, no, but I definitely want to capture him. Zuko glanced to his left, cursing inaudibly for him not having thought of a good lie beforehand. He won't get away from me next time. Zuko finally stammered. That's the kind of thing I'm supposed to say, right? Zhao looked at him suspiciously. The prince was a terrible liar and painfully aware of it. Still, considering he had been saying something on those lines for years, you would have thought the lie would have landed more smoothly from his lips. Not like he lacked practice. Now that Zuko was no longer dead set on capturing the Avatar, he found himself struggling to put his unwavering determination to words that didn't sound cheesy even to his own ears. Zhao didn't look surprised. The man probably didn't expect honesty from Zuko in the first place. The Admiral had known Zuko was lying, but hopefully he guessed wrong about which part. There you are, my nephew. I was so worried for you. Uncle came trotting down the dock, waving his hands in an unnecessary wide gesture to catch Zuko's attention. Zuko cringed a bit. He didn't want to have a spotlight pointed at their direction. That said, Iroh's timing was impeccable. His sudden arrival distracted Zhao from his interrogation. General Iroh. Zhao got his act together and smiled a false, pleasant greeting that quickly shifted into an expression of equally fake concern as the man addressed Zuko. Your uncle and crew appeared beside themselves with worry after your unexpected disappearance. But now that you're back, safe and sound, do tell, where have you been all night? Yes, nephew, I was worried, but we did all rather presume you had gone after the Avatar, Uncle said pointedly, nodding almost impeccably. Yes, Zuko agreed. I heard the Avatar had been sighted and went after him, but I lost his trail. Did you? Zhao said, obviously suspicious. Yes, Zuko repeated bluntly. So, you have no idea where he is? The Admiral's eye never left Zuko's, ready to detect a lie. Zuko tried to meet the glare. You think I would be here if I knew where the Avatar was? He wasn't being entirely honest, but if the Admiral noticed the evasion for what it was, the man didn't call him out on it. The arrow Nomad took off on that accursed bison of his is most likely a long way from here. Zuko added for good measure and prayed that the boy had done exactly that. Zhao smiled unnervingly. My intelligence strongly suggests he's still in the vicinity, hidden away with treacherous outlaws. Zuko tried his best to seem indifferent. He shrugged. The Avatar is long gone, or I wouldn't be here. But be my guest. How you waste your own time doesn't concern me. Zhao's smile widened. I'm glad to hear you're not planning to go after the Avatar's trail. I was worried you'd be disappointed to find out you won't be able to do that. Thankfully not then. Zuko tried to process what the Admiral had said, but it made no sense. It was possible that Zhao was just trying to pick on him for no reason. But that solemn look on Aiwo's face made Zuko fear for the worst. Oh? The prince finally got out. And why would I be unable to go after the Avatar? Zhao's smile widened, if possibly a fraction more. I'm taking your crew. What? Zuko looked between Zhao and Iroh for a while, too shocked and furious for words. You can't do that, can he? Zuko turned to Uncle. Iroh looked tired. I'm afraid he can, and he has. In your absence, he has already assigned all of your crew to his ships. Zuko turned to the Admiral, fuming. This is outrageous. Anyone can see you're doing this just to spite me. You don't need my crew for anything. You're just afraid I'll capture the Avatar first. Don't be such a child, Prince Zuko. You brought this on yourself. Since no one wants to repeat the disaster your selfish, petty rivalry caused at High Tide Village, the Fire Lord has given me supreme authority in all incidents involving the Avatar. Zuko narrowed his eyes. That doesn't mean you can steal my men for no reason. I'm a prince and an exile. You can't order me around. Perhaps it was because Zuko had already known of his father's orders, but his voice came out more confused than angry. The prince's tone and word obviously threw Zhao off a bit, but the Admiral managed to resume his gloating quickly enough. You're correct. I can't order you to stay here and abandon your futile efforts, Prince Zuko. I can only recommend it. Even you must see that capturing the Avatar is far too important for our nation's war effort to be left in the hands of a boy. Either way, I very much doubt that you, or your ship, are going anywhere without a crew, or the kimono rhinos, or your riverboat. Zhao smiled contentedly as the looks of anger, hurt, and betrayal flashing across Zuko's face. Then the Admiral turned his attention to Uncle. General Iroh, my offer for you still stands. After the Avatar has been inevitably caught, I very much intend to go dragon hunting, and your expertise on the matter would be appreciated. You little shit, you already took everyone from me. You can't have Uncle. I'm honored by your request, but my answer has not changed, Iroh said. I understand your worry, of course. Taking down one of the original firebenders is a daunting task. Most men are not cut out for it. But I suspect my presence wouldn't be enough to turn the tide of battle. I fear my dragon hunting days are long gone. Zhao's own smile faltered but briefly before returning with a menacing edge. I see. Perhaps you're right. It appears that back in the day you were rather optimistic in your estimations that you killed the last dragon. General, I wonder, did you make sure the one you did in was the last one, or did you just presume? Well, Uncle continued, unperturbed, looking into nothingness as if lost in memory. I was perhaps a bit rash and overconfident in my youth. I can see that now. Still, it's been a good 40 years since the last time anyone saw a dragon. Are you certain this dragon of yours, the one that stole the Avatar from you, wasn't white and furry with an arrow tattooed on its forehead? Positive, Zhao snapped back, and took a deep breath to compose himself. Though I suppose it matters little that dragons aren't as extinct as advertised, since they will soon be enough. I assure you, in case you change your mind, my offer still stands. Just send word, let me know where you are, and I'll send someone to pick you up. Zhao looked around himself. Not that you'll be going anywhere far from here, I wager. The Admiral turned to look at Zuko again and grinned, lifting his eyebrows. Not that this is a bad place to stay for an exile. Zuko found his voice again, and his words came out more controlled than he would have hoped for. Not desperate or whiny, but a low, menacing growl. You may think you've won, but you couldn't be more wrong. You can lie to others that it's my fault the Avatar has evaded capture so far, but I think you and I both know that's not true. The reality is that you aren't anywhere near as cunning or competent as you think you are. We'll see about that soon enough. Zhao's smile was forced, but it did not falter. Zuko glared at him. You've gotten lucky so far, but you have no idea what you're up against, do you? If you think the answer is a 12-year-old airbending master, I pity you and any fool who will follow you to your inevitable defeat. For a moment, Zhao looked so furious under his carefully placed mask of amusement that Zuko almost expected the man to attack him. With visible effort, the Admiral reined in his temper. Zhao excused himself from their company. To Zhao's dismay, his attempt to getting back at Zuko went right past the young man, though mostly because the Admiral had already hurt him in one of the most horrible ways imaginable. He took my crew. The prince closed his eye and bit his lip. Zuko had taken his crew for granted for years, but now that he was faced with the prospect of losing them, the prince realized just how close he'd gotten to them. The crew was the closest thing Zuko had to a family and friends, and now Zhao had taken them from him. And it hurt much more than the Admiral's insults. Perhaps even more than the fact that Ozai hoped Zhao would capture the Avatar before Zuko did. That at least was predictable and consistent, in a way. It wasn't like his father had made any effort to make his quest easier so far. As soon as the Admiral was out of hearing range, Zuko turned to Iroh. Can he do that? For a moment, Zuko allowed himself to hope the uncle would laugh and tell him the Admiral had been lying or mistaken, that there was a simple loophole they could exploit. Instead, Iroh looked very tired. I fear he is telling the truth. As the Admiral, he has authority over all the Fire Navy, and although he shouldn't be able to pull men or resources from active duty to his own purposes without pressing reason, the new order from the Fire Lord leaves room for a variety of interpretations. The prince took a breath to calm himself. He didn't want to shout at Uncle. In the end, his voice came out a little more than a whisper. And what about you? Can he take you from me? This time Iroh did laugh. It would be a strange day indeed when an admiral can order a retired army general to do anything. Zuko knew his worry was ridiculous. Uncle would never leave me. But he still felt something heavy unclench around his heart at Iroh's words. Even so, the prince's future seemed more unsure than it had in years, perhaps ever. Without a crew, he wouldn't be able to steer or maintain the ship, and he'd probably have to give that up too. There are few constants in Zuko's life as an exile, but the crew and the ship had certainly been among them. Zuko had no idea what the future held for him now. There were only two things he knew for sure. Uncle would be by his side, no matter what, and he would miss his crew. We should probably head back to the ship, Uncle pointed out reasonably, after giving his nephew some time to think it over. Why? Zuko gritted out. It's not like anyone would be waiting for us there. Zuko was being childish, and he knew it. But today he didn't feel like rolling with the punches. He wanted payback. He wanted to do something, or destroy something. Uncle looked at him sternly. I understand you're upset. It's completely natural, and it's healthy to express your emotions openly. But not here, not like this. I suggest you drop whatever idea you're putting together right now and come back with me to the ship. We'll continue this conversation there. Zuko was angry, but also surprised. Owl didn't usually speak to him at such a condescending tone. Uncle guided and made suggestions. He was patient and understanding. He never ordered Zuko to do anything. Owl's behavior was surprising, but even more surprising was the prince's own reaction. Zuko almost didn't mind. At the moment, Zuko didn't feel royal or mature or responsible, and he could hardly blame Uncle for acting like a parent would, a real parent. Zuko knew Uncle wanted what was best for him. Iowa was sometimes demanding, but unlike anyone else in his family, never to the point of unreasonable. Zuko not only trusted his uncle, but relied on him to help him when he himself felt lost. If Uncle thought Zuko was better than this, maybe he was. He would try to be. Zuko nodded and they walked in silence. After hesitating for a while, Zuko started the conversation again. But what about the Avatar? He can wait. Uncle's tone left no room for argument. This is more important. Zuko was confused. What could be more important than keeping the airbender from Zhao? Arrow blinked, twice if he had difficulty understanding the question. Many things are more important than that. Right now, this conversation is. Although the Avatar is the world spirit, the world doesn't actually revolve around him, nor will it stop spinning every time Aang faces an obstacle. And since when has protecting the Avatar been your job? Ever since Aang mistook me for a friend and we saved a village from a volcano together, Zuko thought, but said nothing out loud. Arrow sighed. I'm happy that you're taking such an interest in the affair of the world, but I also want you to stop and think about what you're doing every now and then, Uncle said. Right now, you look exhausted. I thought you wanted me to. Just because you know something very important might be happening, it doesn't mean it's your fault. I want you to take better care of yourself. Your needs matter. Not because you're a prince, not because you need to be rested to be useful later, not because you have a destiny, not because you're my nephew, but just because. Uncle stopped walking and put his hands on Zuko's shoulders. I am proud of you for the things you do, but they aren't all that you are. They don't define you. No shows of courage or proof of skill are required for you to matter. Whoever you decide to be, you're important. No strings attached. Zuko found himself blushing. Yeah, I know that. Do you? The look on Uncle's face wasn't cold or unfriendly, but it still made Zuko feel uneasy. Of course Zuko knew he mattered. He knew he could one day become someone who mattered when he became better, stronger, more worthy, but what? What was he trying to become? A good prince? A future king? A ninja outlaw? A dragon? Something else entirely? Who am I? The decision had always been Zuko's, but so far others had made it for him. From the moment of his birth, expectations had been placed on him, and those expectations had shaped him into the man he was today. But Zuko wasn't what people wanted him to be. His banishment, for one, was concrete proof of that. For a long time the prince had thought it was proof he wasn't enough. Many years and several spiritual encounters later, he begun to consider that being different wasn't the same as being unworthy. In small matters, the prince had always done as his heart told him to do, even when he knew his choices wouldn't please others. In big decisions, however, Zuko had done as he was told to do, because who was he to decide what was right for his nation or for the world? I'm not, a voice inside him confirmed. I'm not qualified to make these decisions, but I care what happens, and that's more than what most people making these decisions right now can say. I care. So why not do something about it? Wow, I'm starting to sound like the Avatar, Zuko realized, rolling his eyes. Shoot me now. Well, since they were pretty much established that hanging around having fun wasn't Zuko's cup of tea, why not do something heroic and stupid instead? We need a plan, Zuko finally deducted from his inner ramblings, guessing that was what Iroh had been trying to state from the start. Uncle nodded, although he still looked unsatisfied with his nephew's reply. Among other things, yes. Well, I could sneak aboard one of Zhao's riverboats and... Zuko's sentence was cut off in the incredulous look Iroh gave him. What, not a good idea? Zuko offered tentatively. Several cups of tea, many explanations, and lots of actual planning later. Iroh and Zuko were more or less on the same page about who had done what last night. Iroh had just finished giving his nephew a streamlined version of what he found out about the Dragon Warriors, while Zuko suddenly stopped pacing around his room and turned to Uncle. I know what I have to do next. Really? And what might that be? Iroh coaxed his nephew gently. The young prince took a deep breath to fortify himself, obviously expecting rejection. He'd been pacing around again as he launched into his explanation. I'm a dragon warrior, but I think we can safely agree that I'm not a very good one. Well, that means I haven't actually been doing any good with my new position and powers. Uncle frowned. It's understandable you feel conflicted now that you've learned more of what your new role bestows upon you. But the way I remember it, you have in fact saved several people and villages with your dragon powers already. Zuko rolled his eyes. Maybe, but I'm only turned into a dragon twice, and both times by accident. Stumbling upon one catastrophe after another may be convenient, but doesn't actually constitute as using my powers to its full potential. Other new powers I may or may not have aside, what good is this thing to anyone if I can't even turn into a dragon at will? Uncle waited patiently for Zuko to explain where he was going with this. This thing, it's my responsibility, and I know I'm not doing it right because I'm not doing it at all. You said dragon warriors were supposed to be able to control their change. Well, if this is true, I should start practicing without delay. Uncle was mildly surprised by the turn of the conversation had taken, but kept a calm expression on his face. I agree that learning to better control your new powers should be one priority, but perhaps we should wait a little longer before we start actual practice. In truth, I'm not entirely sure how to teach someone how to turn into a dragon, and it's quite possible it isn't something you can learn in a day or two in any case. You could at least wait until Zhao is no longer around? Zuko shook his head. The risk of me turning into a large winged animal at an inconvenient moment isn't going to lessen by waiting. Also, just think about what it would mean for us in the long run. If I could transform at will, it would solve our newly found transportation problems. Arrow blinked. Are you saying, do you suggest we abandon the ship and fly from place to place from here on out? Why not? It seems to work for the Avatar well enough, and although I am small, I should be strong enough to carry a passenger with me even long distances. Arrow was thoughtful for a long while. It wasn't an outright bad idea. Certainly not one of the more foolish ideas his nephew had ever gotten into his head, but Uncle was still somewhat uncomfortable with it. Zuko waited surprisingly patiently for him to voice his opinion. Even if, and that is truly a big if, you could learn this talent, it would be very risky for you to travel around as a dragon. No matter how careful we went about it, there would be a considerable increase in sightings, and Zhao might soon find himself with competition for his foolish race for glory. Zuko nodded. It's a risk I'm willing to take, especially considering that traveling around the Earth Kingdom coast as myself might not be much safer. I'm not exactly famous, but I have recognizable features, and the Fire Nation has many enemies. Arrow wasn't quite convinced on the last part. He was fairly certain that in proper disguise, even the mighty Dragon of the West could travel almost anywhere in the Earth Kingdom without fear of recognition. His nephew Scar was more likely to mislead people to presume that he was a refugee fleeing from the war than tip them off he was a Fire Nation royalty. These musings were, of course, purely hypothetical. There is no need for such drastic measures to be taken for them to travel undetected. Not yet, at any rate. Still, you would have to spend a considerable amount of time as a dragon. From what you've described, it's quite different from being human. We do not know what the long-term effects of spending time as a dragon are, or what the limitations of such transformations might be. From the look on Zuko's face, Uncle guessed his nephew hadn't thought that far just yet. But when he spoke, he sounded unperturbed. I understand you have worries, Uncle, but that's another thing we can only learn through trial and error. I want to, and have to learn this, or at least try to, at any rate. And I'd rather start right away. I have a bad feeling the Avatar is going to be in trouble again soon enough. Arrow frowned in confusion. Why was Zuko so convinced Aang was in over his head as they spoke? I know the Admiral appeared to be under the impression that Aang was still nearby, but the young airbender would have to be a fool to stick around after the performance he put up last night. Yes, but this is Aang we're talking about. I'm willing to bet my Tao he's just that foolish. And why would he stay? Arrow asked, truly confused now. Zuko shrugged. I think Aang was looking for a bending master and was planning to ask Zhong. If Deserter says yes, then they would probably stick around for... Wait, what? Are you telling me the Avatar has decided to skip past 2 elements and start his firebending training? And perhaps even worse, thinks Zhong would make a good teacher for him? Uncle asked, shocked. Zuko could only blink. Yes, why? Is that bad? I mean, I get it that Aang is being unconventional, but even so, you have to appreciate the Avatar's logic. There aren't a lot of firebending masters willing to help him out, so you take what you can get where you can get it. Uncle could hardly believe what he's hearing. Have I truly failed to express to you how important it is that the Avatar finish his training properly? Zuko crossed his arms, annoyed. No, but I thought the problem was that he only knew airbending, and therefore lacked the balance and understanding needed to deal with the other elements. I can personally tell you that, for a firebender, the kid knows nothing about fire. So how can a few rudimentary lessons hurt? He'll only be studying breathing anyway. Uncle pinched the bridge of his nose. It is true that at the moment the young Avatar is unbalanced, but it does not aspire truth to his judgment that he thinks himself ready to take on the firebending studies. Nor could these studies end in anything but disaster when he lacks the adaptability of water and the stability of earth. Aang, in his present condition, could not master even a small amount of fire. Also, even if he was ready, Zhang would not make a good teacher for him. Uncle could tell Zuko was starting to see his point now, but the young man still appeared surprised. You don't think Zhang a good match for Aang? But I thought the deserter was infamous for his slow progress techniques, and being a pacifist and all, presumed he would be careful with Aang, and only teach him defensive firebending. Even so, Zhang's perspective of his element is too narrow. To truly understand fire, the Avatar would need to be taught by someone more versatile and less bitter. So, Zuko concluded, whether Zhao finds the Avatar or not, we should expect explosions and disaster in the near future. Even the more reason to start preparing now. Io felt it difficult to argue with Zuko's logic, as he simply nodded. He had learned many years ago that he could not keep his nephew out of harm's way, and had instead opted to try and give him the best possible means of protecting himself when he did inevitably run into trouble. The only way to protect the ones you love was by teaching them to be wise, strong, and brave. Unfortunately, sometimes even that was enough to keep them by your side. That was something Nairo had learned the hard way. We can't practice at the ship or near the colony, Uncle commented, trying to be practical. A remote place far from all people would be ideal as not to draw attention. Zhao took all the kimono rhinos, but we still have the ostrich horses. We bought them ourselves, or I guess I should say you bought them since it was your money. But in any case, they aren't Navy property. Zuko turned around and started packing a satchel with anything they might need on their outing. Io remained seated, absently stroking his beard and thinking things over. He had an unnerving feeling he was overlooking something important, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Zuko turned to him again, done with packing, smirked at himself, looking so thoughtful. Come on, Uncle. Don't even try to tell me you're not at least a bit excited by the prospect of getting to ride on a dragon like the Fire Lords of the old. Iroh smiled back at his nephew, happy to see Zuko so enthusiastic about something for the first time since his breakthrough. Also, his nephew was perhaps onto something with that last remark. Yes, this should turn out to be an interesting day.